Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast, mixed with casting through ancient Greece. Do you like that?
Sounds good.
So, how have you been since the last time we chatted?
I've been pretty busy actually. Lots of obviously just with life, but then my podcast has been getting a lot busier as well. So trying to keep up with everything.
You diving into some new subjects?
I'm watching up on the Greek and Persian wars at the moment, so I'm closing that out. But I've actually started doing some interviews myself, which was not something I'd planned to do with the series, but it seems to be working out that way, and it allows me to get another perspective of other people coming in and giving their, I guess they may have a bit more knowledge than what I do on some certain elements. So it's
Do you
been
get
good.
are you getting nervous when you have to think of like questions to ask and stuff?
Um, yeah, you don't want to risk coming across.
Like me?
I guess no. um, where you don't want to just sound dumb, even though you're meant to have some sort of knowledge on the subject itself, but
So like me.
So, like for example, I recently had a guy. His name's Trevor Cully, and he does the History of Persia podcast. And so I had him come on basically to talk about the Persian defeat during the Greek and Persian wars, and more from the Persian perspective. And so I was trying to be careful not to impart the heroic Greek sort of a lot of the myth behind their victories into the podcast. I wanted to try and make it fairly balanced and just so I could get a good perspective of where the Persians were coming from.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I thought about like whenever I reached out to famous people, it was like really, really hard to kind of because they're famous people, you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to like you know, get the natural flow, like me and you talking, like not saying you're not famous, but like in an aspect of like we're just talking as human to human. But like when that fame aspect gets in, if I'm talking to like a famous person like James Brown or some person that's like the godfather of soul, it's like, oh my God, I'm like, I just can't get past the fame aspect of things because fame gets people weird. It's probably like, I mean, if you met like the king back in the day, like you were like, oh my God, if I say one thing, it's going to be like off with my head, or it's going to be, this person, if I become best friends with them, next thing you know, they build me a palace, they build me a kingdom, I can own my own town and start my own cult. But now it's like, I prefer the natural flow of things because I like to bring up topics that are of interest. Like one thing I've been getting interested in is social experiments. I've actually been creating my own. And now when I say this is completely like I have not hammered out any details. So I'm just going to get your thoughts on this. So what I've been doing is I've been trying to rule out authenticity. And at the same time, I've been trying to rule out basically the main theme of this is that no matter if you say like it's kind of like a test to see if you are open-minded or what society has kind of developed your thoughts in general, which is what we've talked about before. Like how many thoughts are your own? Are they just thoughts of like, based on a bunch of people telling you like, Mark, you are the greatest thought-provoking genius there has ever been, and you're told that from when you're a kid, you are not going to think like normal, like how you normally would if you are spent your whole entire life being groomed that you are this philosopher, this ancient, like modern day Picasso. You would be like, everything you say would be like pretentious. Everything you'd say would be like, this art, this house, it's very peculiar. And you're like, what are you talking about? It's 2021. Just use like the house looks like shit or the house looks nice. But someone has told you from when you were a kid to be this thing. So what I've tried to do with this test is I would try and find basically something I know about you that I know would get you upset quickly. And but what I would do is I would just refute the other perspective. I would talk about the other perspective in a topic that is very close to your heart to see if you would do one of five results. Well, one or four results, I'd say. And one of those four is picked every single time. One is you would shut down the conversation, which means that instead of listening or having the back and forth banter or this type of thing, you would just shut it down and walk away and totally stop messaging the person. Two would be you'd get into an argument with the person. You would try and debate them and it would turn into this hostile thing rather than a peaceful discussion. And three would be more of like you would this is like a crazy one, but you would attack the person's character. So immediately you would go from that topic that you guys were talking about. Let's say, what's something that's very close to your heart, like something you're very passionate about?
Well, I guess Greek history is my one thing. I guess health as well is another aspect of life that I'm right into as well.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Greek one then, because I'm also passionate about it. So it's going to be hard for me to really kind of refute this. But imagine if I said Greek history is a dumb class; it shouldn't be taught in schools. You would be like, well, hang on a second. And then it's something that's personal to you, something you enjoy, and something like this. So you would feel like it would be a personal attack against your character or a personal attack against the things that you actually enjoy. So a lot of people would get into that. And then you'd start going into it and you would see the conversation escalate to something drastic and something quick. So you would then go from this topic. Let's say if I said ancient Greece or whatever is a trash topic, we shouldn't talk about it. Why would you ever want to learn about a bunch of dead people? It only matters about the future. Elon Musk, Mars, all that. If I just said that to you, you would go, okay, well, that's because you're not intelligent. Or you would say one of these options. This isn't necessarily you in particular, but this is another choice that a lot of people would choose. Some parts of society would choose this. It's not, you kind of being defensive about it. It doesn't really mean that you're a bad person. It just means you care about this type of thing. So it's not, there's really no yes or I guess correct answers in this. It's kind of just like just to test society about thoughts and emotions and things of that sort. But and then the other one would be like you care about the person, but you don't want the conversation to end. But you know, if it continues this way, you don't want to keep going into this because you already think so highly of what is in your own mind. So then you just, it's kind of like shutting down. So really, I only, not five, I've only really got four hammered out so far, but I've done this to 15 people and each one has chosen one of these options. They don't want the conversation to end because they care about the person, but they don't want to talk about the topic. So they'll deflect onto something else. Another one is they'll get so defensive about it, like you're attacking them, even though there's no argument or there's nothing that's being written in text or the message that would be defensive. It's just bringing in another perspective, which really it's a pass or fail. And I think the concept is it just shows that it's so hard to change someone's thoughts and it's so hard to have an open conversation platform about something that maybe two people might differ in answers that you really I don't think it's people. I think the issue is society. Society makes you think in these types of ways and makes it so easy to group into your own groups or people that are like-minded individuals that there's no point in wasting any more time trying to invest in someone and talk to someone and develop a relationship with them if they don't agree on a certain thing that you care about. And it, so far the experiment in my mind, I mean, I'm only 23. I'm not a scientist, but it's a pretty good social experiment in my mind. I'm like, shit, you're starting to see a lot of things of like why, we're always in debating. We're always main thing, especially politics. It's all because nobody's really having these open conversation platforms gets into these heated debates. And that's where I got interested in this because I don't know if you ever heard of the milligram experiment.
No, I haven't. No.
So they got a couple like scientist teachers. They would ask these people questions, and the person that they're asking questions to was in another room, and they showed him like, hey, he's hooked up to electric wires. He's got a little electric pads all over his head, and every time he gets a question wrong, you shock him. Each question you ask, you go up a shock each time he gets it wrong. So they would go to the end of the board where there were no more shocks left, and it was to test to see if a person would go all the way to the end of the board. Would they stop because they know it's humanly wrong? They hear someone screaming because it was an actor. They weren't actually getting shocked, but the actor would scream at whatever level of pain. He would say, get me out of here. I don't want to be in here anymore. And I think it's like 9 out of 10 of the people continued shocking them until the end of the thing. And you get to see a video. It's like it was in 1970, something like that. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
1970 or 1980, but they had a video, black and white. And the guy just looks at him and goes, he's in pain. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. That guy sounds like he's dying in there. What happens if he has a heart condition? And you hear the dude screaming, fake acting. And the guy goes, sir, I'm going to ask you one more question. And then he's like nervous and shaking. And they asked him, they said, do it. Any responsibility is going to be ours. He continues with the shock, though. And he goes, so why did you continue to the end of the board if you know that you were hurting this person? You didn't want to do it anymore because you were telling me to, you were forcing me to. It was to test authority, to test like if someone has a little bit more power than you, you're going to do what they say. it's
Mm.
that to me, that's interesting where I started thinking of this social experiment. Like, are you so confined to your own ideologies? Do you care about something so much that you would never waver from your opinion? You would rather dismantle or argue a conversation rather than let it expand, is kind of the point of the thing. And it's not
Yep.
really to rule out authenticity. It's more on the fact of how many times does somebody say that they're this type of way or they're open minded or they're this types of things. And they're truly not because they'd rather get away from it or they'd rather not deal with it rather than put the effort to maybe enhance each other's growth. And I think that's what I try to test in myself too. I try to make sure I'm an open-minded person and getting into these topics and stuff. You saw more people get aggressive than you did passive. You saw more people shut it down than want to enhance the conversation and truly understand each other, which makes it into this bigger point of this fast-paced society we're in. This society that we need to get it right now, not later, right now. When you shut down a conversation is because you don't want to invest any more time because every second you spend trying to talk to this person about this thing, not necessarily change their opinion, but just hear them out. It's seen as wasted time where this relationship should rather die rather than continue on.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it is obviously, like you said, it depends what you're exposed to is your thoughts that are going to develop. Because if you're not exposed to all the information, you're only going to come up with whatever whatever the information that you've been given is, and whether that's just through accident or through people wanting to you to only know a certain amount of information. And I think people that react in a more defensive way, or try and criticize someone over their argument, it comes down to, I think a big part is they don't want to appear that they're wrong, and as well risk not looking stupid, not basically understanding what the other person's where they're coming from, and they'd rather just stick with their line of thinking and try and hammer that home rather than looking stupid in someone else's eyes. Where
Because I think it's easy. Like if you look at like let's take a comparison, something probably. At least back in the day in ancient Greece type times, everyone thought they were on the cusp of something. And then we look at them now, like, oh my God, they didn't even know they just finally figured out toilets like 20 years into the whole entire, they were bringing out philosophical theories and talking about like Socrates, like these amazing quotes, Plato, all these ideas of Atlantis, and none of them had indoor plumbing. And then you're like, now how many things have we discovered and we're like blowing past that 5 years later or 5 years later from that? It's like we think that we know everything now rather than, we admit that we know nothing and we're just constantly growing as people. I mean, I think it's not necessarily like this test when I say it's a pass or fail. There's not really a fail. The pass, I think the only fail I can see is when you shut down and you rather just cut off the relationship than try and continue the growth of it, even if you've known that person for a very long time. And a couple of people I didn't think were going to do that, they tried to do that. And I was like, hey man, like this is not what this isn't real. This is like something I just was playing a little trick on you, but I can't tell you you're an experiment. Hey, Mark, want to do an experiment? Then the whole entire outcome's affected. So I have to tell you after it all goes down. But you start to realize something is like, what what is this thing that we're doing in society, for instance, or in this world where you would rather close off the conversation than understand the other importance and the value of information. It's like just sticking to a certain section of your library rather than expanding it out. Is it because of the comfort zone? Is it because of like the time consumption? Is it because of what? I look at it like information's information. If it's an experience, it's an experience and it should be valued the same as like if you heard like a conversation with Albert Einstein to me is as valuable as a conversation with you. I'm going to get the same information, whether it's about a certain topic that someone knows more about or a certain thing in a different area. There's still information. I'm going to learn something either way.
I think a lot of it is fear, fear of being wrong, especially if you've had that belief for so long. For someone to come along and completely turn it on its head, and for you to potentially have to admit that there's more out there than what you originally thought. And it's funny you bring up Atlantis too, and I've just actually finished recording a bonus episode today, and it was focused on Atlantis and their connection to the Minoans, which were like a Bronze Age civilization in Greece. And I actually brought up the point of people that I guess, invest so much into a certain theory about Atlantis, and it tends to be built off of, say, a History Channel documentary, or it's someone's taken the information um, that Plato spoke of Atlantis, and they've put their own spin or interpretation, and then completely left out aspects that are in the account to come up with their theory. And you find most people just out in the normal world haven't read Plato's account fully, and so they don't understand all the information that's available about Atlantis. And then you get people drawing their own theories based off of what the History Channel documentary tells you, or what someone's book tells you. When if you actually go back and read the Timaeus and Critias, I've got it next to me here. There's a lot in there that just makes so many of the theories, you understand they really need to bend and twist a lot of the information to make them fit for their particular theory.
You know what scares me is how much information do we know is fact that's not fact because we've been told the wrong thing. Like it's just been running for so long. Like when I was a kid, they showed me the little Martin animated short of Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King Day, where it shows that he got shot at the ending, and then to find out it's the government that killed him. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm 23 now, figuring this out, and was like when I was a kid, I didn't even know. I just thought some dude shot him because he was an ass. Like, the guy that shot him was an asshole, not Martin Luther King. He seems like a really great guy. I would love to sit and have a coffee with him. But I thought it was just some dude that didn't like what he was saying and shot him like a jerk. But it turns out it was the government. And then there's like this whole thing, and it goes into the JFK shit that I'm not diving into because there's so many conspiracy theories on that. But whenever you get into an argument with someone, whenever you get into a conversation with someone, whatever, you will do whatever you possibly can, even add details and make up stuff to be able to fit your point and make sure that you become the top dog. It's the same thing in our court systems. They will lie, they will cheat, they'll do whatever type of manipulation, no matter what the cost is, are all on a factor of trying to win. And I go like, who's writing the actual recorded history? If it's not videotape where you're getting to see the clear record, maybe that's the issue with videotapes nowadays, where everyone's like, well, it was this, and they had it on recording. Well, back in the day, you had some dude that was just reiterating a story. And if you go, okay, what about this? If it was incriminating him in front of everybody, he might hide that detail or not mention that detail. And the fact that he doesn't want it to go into the other side, he wants to make sure he's the winner, not the loser. But now we have recordings of things now where it's like I watch a court case and you get to see cop footage, you get to see actual like phone footage. Everything's like you get to see the perspectives like, holy shit, hang on, this is how they were seeing it, and this is how this was seeing it. It's like, okay, well, this might have happened, but how are you being told it? And it's very, very interesting because you start to look through history, for instance, textbooks and stories and accounts and everything. History is written by the winner. Okay, but what are the other perspectives that we're not seeing? How many things are we running off now that we don't really know the truth because we were only told this way because that was what was recorded rather than what was actually known as fact about understanding both influences? Is it possible that maybe your vision of America is different from my vision of America based on what you've seen of America and what I've experienced in America? 100% true. Same thing with Australia, too. People will hit the stereotypes on Australia. You guys have sharks. Everything in Australia can kill you, even though it's a pretty, I would say, in my opinion, a pretty nice place.
It is. And I think a lot of these views, they tend to enter into groups as well, where that becomes dangerous. So no matter whatever new information comes out, it's if you're part of, I guess, a group or I guess you'd say like a tribe, that becomes the accepted story, and no one wants to deviate from that story to risk being an outsider of that group anymore either. So that's another big one. And I was just thinking too, what the experiment you're talking about, I didn't know it by name, but I have heard of it. And it actually featured in a book that I've read, which I know you don't like reading, but I'm sure there's an audio book somewhere.
I don't
It's
like
called,
reading actual thick books, but if you tell me
okay,
about government projects, I'm 100%, and I've studied MK Ultra to the extent as far as they've let you see whatever information's on there.
okay. This one's not too thick either, but it's called Ordinary Men. And it's about, so it's from, like it's after World War II, it was written, but it's about stuff that was going on in World War II. And it's about a police reserve battalion that served in the German army. And the whole premise was it was going from the point of view, I think it was one of the one of the units that they were able to actually interview one of the highest proportion of the members that served in it, and they were quite just frank interviews. They weren't. No one was trying to cover much information up. They freely talked about what happened, and the thing that they found was that these guys, they were middle-aged family men, so they hadn't actually gone through the Nazi education system. They had finished school before the Nazis had come into power, and it was showing how they hadn't been indoctrinated through the ideology of the time, but they were still prepared to go along with the killing that happened. And the thing was, they ended up serving in Poland, and they didn't know what they were going to ultimately have to do, but they were ordered to go out, and they were involved in these early shootings of Poles and Jews and everything that were rounded up in Poland. And it's very similar to the experiment you're talking about. A lot of people, a high proportion of them came down to, I'm just following orders. They were very uncomfortable with doing it, but they felt like the responsibility had been removed because they were told they had to do it. And you only had like a small fraction that opted out at the beginning, that just wouldn't go through with it. But
When about to say, when they did the firing squad things, when they would put someone up against a post and, what is it, blindfold their eyes and have a bunch of people like shoot them. So many of those guns that they had in the mix were blanks, and there was only one with actual live ammunition in it, because they would rotate the guns around to make sure that no one felt like, well, if I tell you this one is the real gun with a bullet in it and you go to fire against someone, you're going to be hesitant because you know that your gun is going to kill this person. It's going to be you. So they wouldn't tell them which gun it was, and they would just give them to the people. So everyone fire, and then the dude would just get shot and nobody knew where the bullet came from. I'm pretty sure the person that probably shot the gun with the bullet in it knows it was fucking him, but before he pulled the trigger, he didn't know. So, yeah, full
yeah, they,
confidence.
yeah, these guys in the accounts. I mean, it's a very it's a tough book to read because it really puts you in the shoes of those soldiers, but as the victims as well. And it's a very sort of it just plays with your head too. You start to wonder, what would I do in that situation? But they do talk about how they would be off in the woods, but they would be paired up with their victim, so they would be waiting in line to take them into the forest. So it was like almost like a one-on-one match. So one soldier was matched up with one person. So I think all these guys had live ammunition, and they had their victim basically standing with them, waiting their turn in line.
It's Have you ever seen the movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
No.
It's with George Clooney, but it's based on a real government project called Operation Jedi. And it's basically about America troops were trying to create psychological warriors by trying to use drugs and certain types of enhancements to be able to find this. Like, it's, what remote viewing is?
Oh, like you mean like with I guess like what they do with the drones and stuff like that, where you're not actually on the battlefield, you're
Kind
separated from it, some way.
Kind of, yeah. I think the last time we used it that we know of is when we tried to find Osama bin Laden. Obama actually did get some influence from some remote viewers. That remote viewing's kind of sketchy territory. I think it does, like, there's a part to it that's probably true, but there's a lot of BS out there. Same thing if you go to like a fortune teller. I bet you there's one fortune teller. I've had my tarot cards read and he's been accurate about fucking everything. But then same thing with the fortune tellers. Like, you go to a crappy one and then they're like, you're going to have 12 children and all this type of stuff. And it's like, all right, okay, I don't think that's going to happen. But remote viewing, what they did was they got a map and they placed it out and they said, try and find Osama bin Laden on this map. We're going to search the area that you go. And it's just like, well, he could be between this town, this town, and this town. It's a 200 something mile radius. You're bound to get lucky and he's going to be fucking in there. Like, it's not an exact location, but the Men Who Stare at Goats movie was training psychological warriors, and the guy that developed the project, oh my God, I wish I could remember his name. Um, I'm blanking on his name. This is the issue with conspiracy theories too, which I'll get to. Is the fact that this guy went to war. He went to the Vietnam War, and he noticed like there was one enemy that was just shooting at them, and there was a whole bunch of troops that were shooting back at him. And he noticed that they didn't necessarily want to kill the guy. So what they did was they'd fire a little bit above where he was at. They'd shoot a little bit in the air. He noticed all the bullets hitting the trees rather than hitting in the field where the guy was, because people naturally didn't want to kill another person. They didn't want to end another person's life. And he thought that was interesting. And then the guy shot and it hit him. And then he ended up getting flown home. And he started this whole Operation Jedi Project Experiment, which was to enhance psychological abilities to try and fight more with peace or fight with your mind rather than fight with weapons, hopefully end wars. Um,
Mhm.
so during this whole thing, drugs got involved and all that type of stuff, and it went down this whole rabbit hole. But there was some like a little bit of slither of truth to it too. There were people probably out there that actual gifts or something like that. They could be able to do things we can't understand, but it's all the power of like I don't think people inherently want to hurt other people. I think it's just a factor of how you get kind of growth by society. I think we're all in this open playing field. We all are part of the same group, but then it devolves into this other thing. Operation Jedi has gone from what the actual program is to being this whole entire conspiracy theory of like they're creating super soldiers and all this type of stuff. And here's the issue with conspiracy theories. Like we said about information, they add a bunch of shit that shouldn't be in that. Like back then, they were talking about like they were doing all this stuff, and then it turns out a lot of that wasn't true. There was just a basic kind of thing to it. But the weird part is the conspiracy theories now, some of them have that, but there are some real ones too, man. Like, did you know Bill Gates had a plan to dim the sun by launching something up into our atmosphere to dim the sun? So I'm like, he wanted whatever dispersed particles, whatever it was. What are you doing in your life where that needs to be the priority? That's not even a conspiracy theory. You can't make that shit up. He had an actual plan to do that. And I'm like, what is everyone's like, what? Go back to Microsoft. I'm like, look, man, I don't know what to do. The world's getting crazy. I'm trying to figure it out, but people are on this freaking like you're trying to watch where they're going and they're going up, down, side to side. I don't know how we got here, but we're here and we're going to dim the sun. And I'm like, good God. Like I'm excited and I'm scared.
So what's the purpose of that? Is that because of the whole global warming aspect?
Yeah,
Is
he
it
was
or
trying to find a way to be able to fix that too. Which at one point he also wanted to launch a missile into our atmosphere to destroy the ozone layer. And that was people were like, "What the fuck are you trying to do?" He tried to disable particles up into the atmosphere to tear down the ozone layer a little bit, like thin it out so it's not so much onto it. Now he wants to dim the sun. I'm like, all right, this is a man that needs to get laid because he's now divorced. I don't mean to
Mm.
hurt him in that type of way, but I'm just like, you got to find it. If I get too lazy or something, I start doing shit I'm not supposed to be doing. I start cleaning the house. I start moving around shit that's like, why did I need to do it? Because there's nothing for me to do. You need to get involved into something.
And talk about unintended consequences once you do something silly like that as well. Who knows what the flow on effect's gonna be. And history is full of that sort of stuff as well, where people have gone, oh, this is a brilliant idea, and then it leads to more problems.
That's what I'm saying is
So
about like, for instance, if you take Plato, there are some people that say Plato was a pseudonym. It wasn't an actual person. It was just this concepted idea that was a part of something else. Do we know 100%? No. Is there a lot of points that go to it? Yes. Does Atlantis exist, or was that a figure of his mind? I don't know. Possibly. We don't know. Have we searched all of the ocean? This is what I'm saying is that like there's truth riddled in everything 100%, but how far does it go from the main point of what it was supposed to be to where it is now? Did we misinterpret it a wrong way? Like we saw witches on broomsticks, for instance, and all the Halloween type style things. There's always a witch on a broomstick. But I've talked to some pagan people like it's just like a meaning for spirit or astral projection. It's not. It's supposed to be witches on a broomstick. It's kind of a depiction of astral projection, but we've taken it as like witches aren't real because they ride on broomsticks. Okay, well maybe witches are real, but they don't ride on broomsticks. Maybe that was just an interpretation of what astral projection was and what it meant to them. What are we recording or what are we doing right now that's going to mean something different 100 years from now? It's very, very interesting to see the kind of curve of it all. You know what I mean?
and yeah, and the importance of, I guess, where the original concept developed. If we don't have the same importance in say whatever festival or whatever belief that was to this day, we're not as concerned with holding the same views and traditions. So we start to see just myth enters into the realm and things are explained differently. And but yeah, and this is the big thing with conspiracy theories. It's there's usually some basis of fact in there somewhere, and then it's built upon. And it's much like what I was talking about with the Atlantis thing. You have um, a set amount of information, but then it's what that the person who's presenting it to you, what they choose to actually show you, and even how they twist the words of the original source. Um, I mean, and it's again only probably a small proportion of people in any subject have probably have read the original sources behind ideas that are put forward. And not everyone has the time to do it either. So I mean, unless you specialize or you're interested in an area, chances are you're not going to know all the information or what the original concepts were in the beginning.
Well, back to the experiment thing that I was mentioning before. Now it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Ready? Here it goes. The reason why science and the reason why religion are always at conflicts is the fact that one is trying to destroy the other and prove the other one wrong. How many times does someone explain their perspective of religion or their understanding of what they believe in, and someone tries to tell them, well, where's the science in that? Someone believes that the earth is flat. What is your science in that? What is your logical understanding of that? Here's all the science that tells us differently. Why is it all about taking down someone else's perspective to be able to improve your own or insert your own into their mind? So the experiment actually makes a lot more sense now. Not bad for a 23-year-old kid. Huh? That's a good one.
Yeah. And
If you have
I
problems with
mean,
my experiment, you tell me, right?
yeah, I would. I would. I
Okay.
mean, I'm going along because what you're talking about, I've read about, and I mean,
Wait, hold
I've
on. Are you telling me somebody created this already? Because I'm going to be very pissed if you tell me that. I feel like I
no,
was on the
just
cusp of something.
in different. I think in different iterations that it's been done where people look try and understand what motivates people to do a particular action, or you know, by exposing them to a certain lot of ideas and not showing them other ideas. And I mean, it's again, it's like Plato's cave allegory. They choose the people in the cave are basically shown what people want them to see, so they don't actually understand what reality really is.
In 1904, there was an Egyptologist that she was walking through like this memorial or this like excavation site or something like that, and she started crying and having a breakdown, and people were like, what's wrong with her? And she's like, there used to be trees here, there used to be a garden here, there used to be all these things. And they said that she was actually reincarnated from someone that lived in that civilization that she was in. And everyone's like, yeah, it was a reincarnation thing. And was a peak in our society when religion was a huge thing. It was big in 1904. That was a big thing, was religion. There was really not a whole lot of science out there. Now, the way I heard that was, okay, that could be a possibility. I'm not saying she's wrong, but what about if you're an Egyptologist, which she was, studying something so much? Have you ever just like started seeing what you were studying or getting so involved into the thing that you were studying? I mean, medical students get it all the time where they're researching a certain disease and they start feeling like they have some of the symptoms. So I'm like, maybe she was so involved in researching and trying to, create or recreate this thing in her mind. You're studying something, for instance, let's say you're studying Atlantis. You'll start thinking in your mind what Atlantis looked like in your own perspective. Did it look like this? Did it look like this? You can basically almost picture yourself walking down whatever your idea of Atlantis is when you're reading so much about it. Does that mean that Atlantis is real and you're getting visions of it? I don't know.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's because you're so involved into it. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I mean, I've seen the same thing because I mean, my I study ancient Greece, and that's what my show's all about. But over the years, I mean, I've studied World War II, the Napoleonic era, many areas of history, and when you delve deep into it and you really start reading a lot of the accounts, and especially descriptive accounts, you really start to feel like that you could have been there yourself. Just you start to get the images of what say a battlefield may have been like at the time, and what was going on. You start to feel like that you really could have been there yourself during that time.
This isn't the second. I mean, this isn't the first time that you told me I said something that someone else has already created. I was saying to truly admit that or to truly admit you know nothing is when you start to know everything or something like that I said. And then you were like, that's Socrates. And I was like, what? It's just a second ago, you were like, I've heard the same reiterations of that. I was like, am I being reincarnated from all these great people? That's what I'm saying. Is you can start to see the perspective of how it starts to go. And that's what I just want to try and make sure that like, at least I try my best to make sure that I understand. And that's kind of what the whole experiment was about, was trying to understand the other perspective and how hard it is to be able to do so when you can't truly release your own perspective, when you truly can't put your guard down, can't put this defensive tactic that society has kind of built you to have, because everything nowadays is that it's going to be taken from you. You're going to lose something, and that's not what it is. Sometimes it's just about learning something new. Doesn't mean it needs to necessarily change what your thoughts are, but to understand the others, to truly have this, sitting down and sipping wine and having a feast together type thing. You need to lose all the aggression and all the points and all the defensive tactics that you have to truly understand someone else. Now, I'm not 100% with that as well either. I have some things that I will defend to the dying day, mostly when it comes to the factor of a human life. But, it's the concept of learning, it's the concept of understanding. I haven't just from talking to so many people, I've kind of understand everyone thinks differently. I'll have you on, and then someone else down the road will have completely different thoughts and emotions than you do. And it's like, well, I gotta settle back to, I gotta hit this person's frequency. I think that we're all on the same notes of the same frequency, but we're all just so scared of like the change, so scared that who we are is going to be lost and someone's going to mess with us because it's other people doing so. But if it's your government, if it's other people that you look for and you put trust in, not even knowing who they are, you're 100% fine with them changing you. You're 100% fine of doing these types of things. I mean, I've been also getting interested in the corruption, a lot of these corporate companies. There's Walmart. I don't know if you saw, they put out a tweet that was promoted, and it was like a gay couple kissing and saying Walmart supports you and we're going to do your best, even though Walmart's known to have a system that wants you to kind of fail in a way. They don't care about you. They give you a 3-strike policy. They treat you as a number, not as a person. They don't give a shit about your birthday. They don't give a shit about anything about you. That's kind of the thing, is because if you look from a corporate standpoint, it's about making money. It doesn't mean they don't, it's not a mom and pop shop that's going to care about your businesses or anything like that. They only care about the money making process. Walmart, for instance, or Amazon, for instance, there is a whole entire, and here's where it gets nuts. So you got to stick with me on this. I'm about to go off on a tangent. You ready? Okay.
Okay.
So Amazon was called out on Twitter in March about Amazon employee had talked about how they give you like 11 minutes. Like they find like if you're getting something delivered or to a certain spot, they calculate the number of time it takes for you to get there. The average Amazon employee stays there for 3 years because they make it impossible for you to go past that or get retirement benefits or anything like that, because they start to think that you get lazy after 3 years. That's what Bezos has calculated, the percentages that it takes 3 years for you to get lazy. So an Amazon employee said that there's a thing in their guidebook talking about how they had to piss in bags and shit in bags just to make the right time so they didn't get fired. You don't get fired by another employer. You get fired by an app. An app would message you saying you have lost your job at Amazon, because they want to make it so machined as possible. They want to make it to a factory running like a cog. They don't want any grease or anything stuck in the tracks. So some person called out Amazon on Twitter, and Amazon fired back and said, these allegations are not true. These are conspiracy theories. They're false things. Then a couple of people from Amazon had commented saying, I love my job at Amazon. Amazon's an amazing place. You know what they did?
I think I've read something about this. Though, aren't they hired bots or something like that? People are actually
They're
hired to.
fucking bots. One of the
Yeah.
dudes clicked on one of the people that commented, I'm an Amazon employee and I love my job. And it's a famous guy. They took his face and they used his profile picture as a bot picture, and they got caught. And then some Amazon employee actually put up the real guidelines that does explain about pissing in bags and shitting in boxes and all these types of things just to make delivery times. And Amazon said, we have whatever. They gave some law answer like, well, we don't understand, or we don't understand any of the allegations that are being thrown against us. We have no comment. And then it's like, you just got caught in a fucking lie. And they back down. You start to notice that these corporate companies, like a bunch of people, like when that Walmart promotion came out, a bunch of people commented, like, even though you're doing this and you're known to do this, Nestle's the biggest one. Nestle was trending on Twitter like a couple of weeks ago about the chocolate and the child slavery that's going on with that. That's known throughout Nestle's history. Nestle, I learned about this 2 years ago when I talked to a chocolate blogger that was talking about the horrible actions and slavery type things that Nestle does in other countries. Just because they can pay them so cheap, they can make them work in the worst fucking conditions. And I'm like, Oh my God. Can we let's attack those instead of attacking each other? Let's take down these corporations and let's start looking at the fact that everything is running. If you want things to run by machine, then have it run by a machine. I don't care about that anymore. I don't want people suffering because they have to shit in a box to make sure you get your fucking 2 day ship of whatever the hell you're ordering, toothpaste or whatever.
Mm. And the aspect too of trying to move people on after 3 years because people get lazy. I wonder, have they really considered? I mean, I'm assuming these are jobs in like warehouses and more mundane type
Yeah,
activities that would need to be done. You know, people need a purpose as well. I mean, if it's just this routine, like, on a production line where you're just doing the same thing over and over throughout the day, where's the self value in that as well? I mean,
that's the
it's
point.
how much of it being laziness and how much of it is where's my purpose? I'm just doing the same thing over and over, and there's only so long that you can do something like that without. I mean, yeah, if you're a robot, that's what a production line is perfect for a robot to do. But human beings, well, they want to find purpose and happiness in life, and when they're going to work for 10, 12 hours a day and doing the exact same thing day in, day out, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel, like, I mean, what what do you work for?
So this was brought to me by a Joe Rogan podcast with Crystal Ball and I think his name's Saja Serengeti. I think his name is.
Mhm.
They're like political analysts. They talk about a lot of this stuff, and they're both on different kind of political sides. So they kind of that's what works with their co-hosting is that they both kind of attack. They talk about these things and they kind of express the other perspectives in one place. And they talked about this. Like you have a 20-minute lunch break and it takes 10 minutes to walk across the warehouse to be able to enjoy your lunch break. So you literally only get 2 minutes before you have to start walking back. And it's like you start to imagine that for 3 years. Like 3 years of being treated like a cog in a machine, like you're saying, you're going to lose ambition and want to do so. And they consider that being lazy and they don't really care about you. That's the thing is a lot of people put these faith in these companies. And this is where I have the biggest problem is that these companies go out and say, we stand with you, we care with you. You saw it recently when Chick-fil-A was under attack on Twitter. How many companies changed their fucking profile picture with a rainbow flag? I bet you Sony does not give a fuck about who you want to fuck. They don't care. They want to sell stuff. And that's what they're doing now is that to move their product, they're trying to act like they stand with you. Did this happen back in the day? Or was it just like they would be called an escape or an illusion artist? Now it's these giant corporations. It goes back to ancient Greece days. Did this all happen back then? You knew the tricky snake oil salesman that would sell you beard growth formula. Is that what's happening now with these types of people that are doing these that are running these companies and these corporations? That's the issue is I talked about. I don't think these corporations are bad. I just think it's an issue that has been long plagued through the society of not giving a shit about the person that follows you, not giving a shit about a person that you don't have any connection to and you don't know. Mark, before this podcast or before any podcast we ever recorded together, I wouldn't have cared if our conversation went sideways in a text chat because I didn't know who you were. Now I am invested into you. I care about you and I don't want it to go sour. I want our friendship to be long and prosperous and carry on for many decades.
You build a relationship. I mean, it's not just an abstract idea anymore.
So maybe the issue is the disconnect in society, the fact that you don't have to get to know every single person on the planet. But me talking to you and then you talking to someone, you go, wait, you were on Rob's show as well, too. Now we're connected. You start to build a spider web. This isn't something that's going to change in one lifetime. This is going to take generations upon generations where eventually you run into a store and be like, hey, my name's this. I'm friends with Jim. Oh, I love Jim. You know Jim? Well, any friend of Jim's is a friend of mine. Then it starts to build this open communication where you start to see caring come back because a factor of now, necessarily you might not have a relationship with that person, but they know someone that you have a good relationship with, and it starts to enhance the growth. Now you're less likely to push them in front of a fucking bus because you know the person that they like is a friend of yours as well too. These corporations, everything that's gone wrong in society is because nobody understands or nobody has any connection with the people that are following after it. I don't know any 3 generations from now. I don't know any of those people. I have no emotional contact for any of those people because I don't know them.
Mm.
The issue starts with you need to start bringing in communication in an era of conversation, creating a community again. Work small, it'll start to affect globally on some things. It's not just about the environment, it's a factor of getting to know and understand other people to develop relationships that eventually you're not going to sell that person out for a fucking thing when you actually understand the human connection aspect of life.
It's yeah, it's shared values. I mean, once everyone agrees on the same value system or they've got a connection to each other, they're more likely to cooperate and work together. And this is the other thing with you talk about with businesses. They tend to have slogans or key words about about their values. And I mean, again, it's like what you're talking about with jumping on the bandwagon on whatever social issues that is at hand. They have these values that they spew out with their employees, but their employees, they see that, oh, these values don't apply to the upper levels. It's only applied downwards. So they mean nothing to anyone anyway, even though these companies try and promote, oh, we're all about fairness or equality or whatever else, but everyone can see behind the scenes, no, they're not. And so there's no value in that whatsoever. And this gets back to, I think I may have talked about this book last time, Sapiens, and it talks about how humans, with how we're able to adapt to this ability where we can abstractly connect through ideas. We don't actually need to form a genuine relationship, which we can do apparently up to about 150 people, but we can start to form abstract ideas that then connect us, whether that be a nation, like you be overseas and you meet another American, all of a sudden you've got a connection and you can find some common ground. And that's another very interesting, I'd recommend you read that one too. It's just got some excellent ideas in there on just on how the human so how humans have socialized
Yeah.
and be able to create larger communities to be able to become so successful. But in the meantime, I mean, we've created these civilizations where, I guess, certain aspects like abstract ideas, like money as an abstract idea, has become more important to others.
I think we can both agree that it's better now than it was back in the day, right?
I think, I guess it depends what areas you're talking about as well. I think
Yes. That's
a
that's
lot of,
exactly my point there, Mark. I'm glad you said that because what I'm talking about, for instance, trying to survive is 1,000 times easier. But what is one thing that they had right back in the day when it came to kings? People don't want this monarchy or this type of thing where they have to praise to a ruler. But the issue was is that the connection was still there. The connection between a person that's of a higher power, an elite, you would say. We have elite companies now that don't give a shit about you because there's too many people and they don't have the time to invest into any single one. They'd rather consider you a number. The king knew his people, not necessarily all of them, not necessarily cared about them, but it's an aspect of when someone attacks your people, you look at that as an attack on yourself because these are your people that you rule. These are the people that have to do what you say. You're the king. They appraise you because you are seen as a god to them in some types of ways. To them, they are your subjects. Whether you care about them or whether you want to kill them 1 second, you still understand that these are your people. When an outside force comes in and attacks you, that is attack on your people and attack on you also as well. It's an extension of yourself. These companies don't give a shit about that. The connection's gone. It's elites, but without the connectivity to the people. And when you don't have that connection with the people that are working for you, or you don't have the connection with the community around you, or all these types of things, people bring up points like, well, like I brought up this point, for instance, Domino's was fixing potholes in my town. If you like, all the funds were going to fixing potholes. People were loving Domino's. They weren't doing that out of the kindness of their heart. They were stamping over the potholes that they covered. They were stamping a Domino's symbol. It's advertising.
yeah, there's an
We pay
ulterior
for,
motive.
yeah, we pay for the taxes to fix our streets or pay for our education system. Not necessarily. A lot of that stuff does not go to that at all. Actually, a lot of these companies are the ones that are doing this and fixing these things because they're getting tax breaks out of it. There's a hidden agenda there. That's what I'm starting to say is back in the day, they were more honest about their shit. There was a more of a connectivity thing when it came to you knew who was in charge. You knew this. A lot of people don't know the area of their own local government. A lot of people don't know the hidden agendas that all these companies start to have. And then when they get proven out later, all these people freak out. It's like, expect that with all this lack of communication, they're going to do whatever is going to get them money, what's ever going to make their lives better. It's not about this whole like they're all evil. No, there's just no connectivity there. There's no emotion. There's no raw, whatever the hell you want that would create growth in a society.
Yes, there's again, it's lack of a core value within a society. I mean, and is it because societies have got so big now? And I don't know. It's another thing as well. Like you talk about in the older times, where you have like a king um, and that type of setup. Often the kings were quite constrained too by the nobility because that's where a lot of the money came in. So I wonder if it's almost like a similar idea with the nobility has been replaced by business, like the economic markets, which back in the earlier times they were seen as a lower class. But I wonder because all the money's tied up with business now, governments, but they're not. And even I think if you did have a king like a sovereign ruler, they're going to be constrained by whatever the markets are doing and whatever business is around as well. Because if they if they don't do what business wants, the business is going to disappear, and your kingdom's going to be quite minuscule in the end. It's going to not be able to compete on the world stage.
With Crystal Ball and that one guy I was talking about that was on the Joe Rogan podcast, they actually tested that people that make under $25,000 a year, 25,000, some people that make a $5,000 a year are getting taxed more than people that are making millions. It's set up, the system is the richer you are, the easier it is to succeed. Not on a factor of you have more money to spend, is that the government doesn't go after you. What's really interesting is a point they brought up, which I never even thought of this perspective. I looked at that as like, well, that's a bunch of companies that are just taking advantage of younger people that can't support themselves or these types of things. No, it's because the rich are not going to, if the IRS goes after them, it costs a lot of money for the IRS to be able to find $1,000 that you didn't pay for taxes. They'll find it, but it costs a lot of money to be able to do so. It's easier to attack someone that doesn't have money to back up in court. When you attack a rich person, the IRS does, it's very, very difficult for them to do because of the fact is they'll keep doing all these pursuing charges and all these things. The guy will keep throwing money at it to make sure it keeps disappearing and gets put on hold and hold and hold. And it's all about the waiting game. Next thing you know, you're going after someone for $5,000 and it's been 9 years because all they keep doing is finding ways to completely bury it or do all these other types of methods. You're losing more money going after a $5,000 thing. You're $1 million in the hole over $5,000. But with poor people, it's easier to do. The IRS goes, you didn't pay 300 and something dollars. We found that. They're not going to take you to court and say, what do you mean? I paid it. They're not going to do that at all because you don't have the money to be able to survive in court. You think you have more money than the government does if you're making under $25,000 a year? And they brought up that point, and I was like, the system is set to beat the shit out of you if you're poor, keeping you there? What's the whole entire point? Isn't this about like having the American dream and having this experience or having this be able to create whatever you wanted in life? And you start to
Mm.
realize, no, it's kind of like we like it where you're at because you're not really doing super well, but you're not doing super, super bad. You're surviving at least. I want to focus on these people that are going to make us more money in the long run. It's all about a factor of money. I think that's when it started to get contaminated. When you see a person that gets elected king back in the day or, ends up becoming king, are they spoiled as fuck when they start to realize how much power and money they have when they can get their subjects to kiss their toes and hold their gold robe? 100%. It's very, very hard. When someone like people talk about the presidency down here, for instance, I don't think any of those people are bad people. I think they immediately wanted to get into office and do a bunch of things. And they start to realize if they do a bunch of things, it's going to fuck up a lot of shit. Like, I want to pass free healthcare. Well, you can't do that because we have this. And if you do that, a bunch of people are going to lose their homes. And then you're going to have over 2 million something people on the street with free healthcare, but no home to survive in, which are eventually going to die of starvation. And you're like, oh my God. So what do I do? Well, the best thing that you can do is exactly what we've been doing this whole entire time. The issue is that we've dug ourselves in a hole and there's no seeable escape from it. And I think that's like that with a lot of things that end up going bad is the factor of money, the factor of all these things that get contaminated into a person's ego, the seven deadly sins, if you want to call it, all these types of little ones and twos get incorporated into your life. And eventually you lose track of the main progress and you slowly do not see the diminish of your own character in your own society because you're so involved into it upon generations. You end up losing the main aspect of just being able to survive on your own. I know this is like a lot different from the first time we've talked, but it's really interesting when you start looking at like ancient times, which you study a lot of, and trying to look at today's times. In some ways, we're way better, but in a lot of ways, we're also missing some main aspects that should have been held on to or enhanced a little bit. The area of getting to know your neighbors because you need to survive, the aspect of understanding that food is a difficult process. And now we've made it so fucking easy to get food that more of it goes to waste. And it's like, what are we doing? Are we missing some main factors of being able to just have enough to feed ourselves rather than having a bunch of food and extra that's going to get thrown out?
Not only that, just I guess even with the food, like just the way it's produced now, and again, this all comes down to money as well. By being able to produce a large amount of food for a lot cheaper, we're making it less nutritious, and we've got, I mean, there's I think sugar and vegetable oil and everything just about in any packaged food you eat these days, which they're now showing that consuming these things have a direct relation to chronic diseases that people are developing over the last, I mean, 50 years or so. Whereas if you stick to, I mean, I guess when you look at it like agricultural times, they believe that. So the theory I've heard is a hunter gatherer, on average, would be um, a lot healthier because you were exposed and eating natural foods that came from nature seasonally, so you had a very varied diet. Then agriculture came along. Now, agriculture is great for civilization, for building society on a large scale because it's cheap. You can feed many people with it. But the individual themselves, they suffer because what you're producing is far less nutritious. And the people that are farming are actually spending a lot more time in the field to produce what needs to be produced. And not only that, your diet now is like, I mean, probably 80% that, that thing that you're growing, whether that's some sort of wheat based bread or whatever it is. And I think that's when you start to maybe see a shift in, I guess, health for the individual. I mean, health for the civilization society obviously boomed, but when it comes down to an individual's perspective, it's not so good.
Do you think it's just because at one point the lack of communication, the amount of people that are out there just seemed like it was worthless to try and create and trying to get to know your whole community because the number of people in this world or the number of people of this country or number of people in just in the society as general has just increased to a point where it's like, oh God, another new kid to the class. It's like this is the 50th new kid this week. Like I can't just keep introducing and saying hi to everyone. It was easier when there was 10 of us, not when there's 63 of us. Like there's a lot of us now. I think it becomes to that point where it just starts to seem like you're wasting energy and you're wasting more time into something that's not helping out your life. The deal back in the day was I gave you something, you gave me something, and then we both received something. We both got what we wanted. You gave me a banana, I gave you an orange. Okay. And then we have this trade. Now trades are like, you give me this, but I also want more. You give me this, but I also want that as well, too. It's all about like, what can I get from this person? It's about growth. You only really truly care about, I think eventually the world has gotten to this point now where it's all a little bit more about selfishness and some aspects. Some people post something like these companies, for instance, they're posting things saying that they support other people, but they're not in support of other people. They care about their sales. They care about keeping an audience and hitting down an avenue. I had people message me about shirt making because I make some cool designs on some shirts, I think.
Yeah, I've
And they
seen some
go,
of them.
what, what do you think I'd get more merch sales if I just made this lettering of my podcast in rainbow colors and put it on a shirt? Do you think I would hit a new audience or get a new audience from it? And I'm like, why would you do that? Just for sales? Like, are you back? Can you back up all that? Or is it just the fact of you just want money? Well, I think it would make a good option avenue. It's pretty trendy to have rainbow colored things right now. And I'm like, that's where I see the corruption just got in. Like, what are you talking about now? That you're going to say that you support something, but you know nothing about? Like, it's really,
Yeah.
really interesting. I just wish people would be more authentic in that aspect of things. It's not about saying, like, I support you because you want all this greed or all this type of stuff onto your head, like people loving you because you say you are this thing and you're not. It's going to get ruled out in the end. People are pretty good at trying to sort out bullshit. It might take a while, but they get there eventually. I just think more people should be honest in the factor. The king, when he told you you're gonna get your head chopped off, you got your fucking head chopped off. Like it's that was authentic shit. It's very, very hard to lie about certain things back then. And today it's really super easy to lie about shit. Yeah, we could point out different examples of maybe there was this or maybe there was that, but in some ways, I see society as taken major leaps backwards.
And that's the and people are just following along with what they're exposed to. Because I mean, if it starts at the top where this is success is showing, by following this line of thinking or just uh, entertaining a certain group just so you can make more money, and then people that are not as successful start seeing that, oh yeah, that's a good strategy, maybe I can do that too to be successful, because everyone's trying to compete on that stage as well. So it's no longer about the issue itself, it's about how do I compete, and that's another strategy. By trying to win people on my side, if I show that I care about a certain issue, then more people will come and support me. It doesn't matter if I actually care about the issue or not, but and I think this just filters down until you start getting to just independent people that try and use the same tactics that they see working in higher up corporations.
For somehow we've replaced the mentality of wanting to be an eagle and soaring high above and reaching our hopes and dreams to wanting to be a snake just to blend in with the crowd and make sure that we don't get exposed. You know, that's very, very interesting in my mind to see how, like, back in the day, I think it was very, very hard to be full of shit. You know, if you go around town saying I'm the best fighter that there ever is, some dude's going to challenge you to a fight and they're going to rule out if you truly are or if you're not. Nowadays, it's like a bunch of people say that you do this and nobody ever wants to sort out that thing. You know, it's weird, I would say. I think it's been on my mind a lot too, especially with these social experiments where I'm like, what were they doing back in the day that actually seemed like they have some pretty good promise to it? The milligram experiment was a big one. I think people are more caring than they are back in the day, but I think there's a bunch of people that truly want to say something, but they feel like they have no power to be able to do so. And I'm like, that's where you have all the power in the world. You know, you got to believe that you have it. If you immediately diminish yourself right off the back, you're not going to accomplish anything.
I think it's one of the core aspects of it is people feel like they're removed from the responsibility because they've got a higher power or authority that's telling them what they can do, and it's fine. Continue pressing that button, it's fine. We're in control, we're running the experiment, you're just part of it. And and people go along with it, and it filters into more serious things like that book I was talking about with Ordinary Men. It's people feel like they're doing um horrendous actions, but they feel they're removed from responsibility because I'm just following orders. I'm doing as I'm told by a higher power. And even deep down, they know what they're doing is wrong. They can feel it in their bones. But again, for some reason, it comes down to this level of authority, and people really getting mixed up into. I mean, I don't know. It's not that they think authority's right, but it's. I mean, is there an aspect of fear as well by not following through? What will happen to me if I'm an outcast, an outsider? Um, and I think that's the same thing with all these groups too. Like if you don't follow along with presenting the certain ideals, are you then cast aside because, oh, why aren't you showing your support?
I feel like the disconnect between the brain and the body is one thing. The fact that we want so much to be different, we want so much to be the exception of the rule. We want to be famous. We want to be that one in a million that becomes this amazing thing, that becomes this thing that is admired by all. You know, the one that would revolutionize the times. And then our body slowly and society slowly fits us into a cog that fits into most of the system. You know, a lot of people, they just kind of do what they have to do to be able to survive rather than go and pursue other things. That's why I think it's kind of interesting, all the people that say, like, I'm a hustler, I'm this hustle type person, I'm going to hustle. Because I look at it like you're trying, but I think you got a small grasp of the puzzle. You got a confidence. That's the most important, is having the key to confidence, which is going in there and saying, I'm going to do this. And that's exactly what's going to happen. But then their actions reflect differently. Their thoughts and their motivation, a bunch of people will say they'll do something and then they'll go and not do that. They'll do something completely different. They'll go back to exactly what they were doing before. You know, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If I might bitch and complain, but I'm going to end up doing it. There's a difference between doing something and then just saying it. And I think a lot of people can talk up a big game, but when it comes down to the giant line of when they have to do it, they don't do it because I think society has kind of subliminally put something into your head. Old
And I think
experiments, MK Ultra, brainwashing, they're all subliminal messages that get put into your head that we see on TV. You see that all the time. There's a fucking murder your thirst, whatever that damn drink is. That's just water. It's just mountain water. That's all it is. It's fucking water. My buddy had it, opened it up. I go to drink from it, and I'm like thinking it's going to taste like something. I drink it. It's fucking water. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, he's like, yeah, it's $1 a can. And I'm like, what? Regular water, $3 for a 24 pack of water in my town. What are you talking about? $1 a can. But people like it because of the label, because of their advertising, because of their product, because they talk about all this crazy stuff. They get some people mad. Some people really enjoy. It's just water. It's nothing different from that. Yeah, it might taste like there's no preservatives in it, but hopefully, if you're getting fucking water, it doesn't have artificial preservatives in it,
it
even though
shouldn't
some of them do.
anyway. Yeah. And it is crazy. I mean, and again, and a big part of that is too, by putting a dollar value onto something and with some good advertising, it convinces people that it's better than whatever's cheaper because it's got a supposed higher value to it.
It's like my fear right
And
now of telling you that we're not recording right now because I just noticed in the corner it doesn't say recording. I guess I accidentally double clicked the button and we stopped. So we've just been talking, me and you. That's the thing, is like I didn't, I'm too scared to tell you, but there we go. No, I'm kidding. We're recording.
I can see recording up in the corner.
But it's a factor of like dropping a message to someone, dropping something to someone, making them think a certain way. It's what we go back to, we talked about before. How much of what you think is actually what you think, or is it just influenced by something else in society? For so long, I thought that Martin Luther King was just shot by somebody. Then I find out it's the government had a plan to assassinate him, and they did it. And you're like, what? How much of the stuff that we've learned through history has been told in this way where you think differently and it pins you up against something? There's like, let's take do you know who the Crips and the Bloods are?
Yes, yep.
They've been
Gang members.
fighting for ages. About what? They don't fucking know. They don't know. Japan has a 5,000-year-old history. They're doing things that they don't know why they're fucking doing it because they've been doing it for so long they forgot the purpose of it and they continue to keep on doing it. It's what I've talked about. If you're getting a $5 charge every month onto your card, are you going to go through the calling the bank, the long fucking process of figuring out where that $5 comes from? Or are you going to be like, it's $5, it's nothing? And then you would just skip over it and keep letting it go and go and go until eventually it might get to a point where like, where the fuck is this $5 coming from? It's all on an aspect of how much of it is a hassle for you to be able to understand this, or how much have you been told this type of thing, this is how it is, and you can never question it. That's when you should raise the most questions, in my opinion.
And that's again, it comes back to your other point too, where you're people are comfortable in their lives in what they're used to doing, where they continue along, and what's happening in the government or business or whatever else, it doesn't really, people don't see it as affecting their life or their everyday going about doing what they do in their everyday life because they're too busy focused on that. And people just don't want to put the effort into then challenging whatever's happening over there somewhere when they go, whoa, it doesn't really affect me right now, or I have no power to do anything about it. And then down the track, yeah, things may change, and then people wonder, where did this come from? But it's all started. It's usually small aspects of change will happen that just are minor inconveniences where people, yeah, like you said, they don't, obviously a small percentage of people are going to get involved, but then the most part of society goes, oh, whatever, it doesn't really affect me too much until, I don't know, 10 years down the track, there's a big change happening because of it.
Is it fear, lack of consideration, and unwilling to care? Or
No,
is it what?
I just think people are comfortable in their lives, and when something doesn't impact their life directly, it's you go, why do I need to? It's another worry. Why do I want to worry about something else when I've got everything else that does impact me that I need to take care of now?
But with that train of thinking, are we ever going to expect change? What I don't like is the fact that everything tells us that we can do this. Everything tells us you need to be, you can, if you go and be hardworking, you can achieve your dreams. Well, in comparison to what you're actually doing, it's pretty fucking hard. Going to a job every single day, being able to manage a house, being able to do all this type of stuff. It tells you these certain things and makes the impression that you're not doing these types of things, making you create more and kind of feeding more into the system. It's a nonstop treadmill run. It's the same fucking thing over and over and over again, but in different ways. It's manipulation. It's these types of tactics, which, if you're a country, that's the best way to run it. If you got all these people in it, because you don't care about, if you're running the country, you don't care about the people that are in your place. Sadly, that disconnect between the king and his servants becomes something different. You only care about the money. People aren't seen as people anymore. They're seen as a number. They're seen as a little peg in a system. They're not seen as like a human person with experiences and stories. And I think that becomes when we have this era of lack of communication. This whole entire thing we're coming in. It might be an aspect of fear. It might be an aspect of value. It might be an aspect of lack of consideration. It might be an aspect of hard work. It might be an aspect of a billion different things. The issue is that we're not having anything that's clarifying this for us. We're having all these things happen that we're not even realizing are happening. When you go and go, huh, I'm hungry for a McDonald's cheeseburger. Was that because you saw an advertisement last night before you went to bed about a McDonald's cheeseburger? Probably. You're seeing and you're being shoved and force fed all these types of information. And that's like what's it's so interesting about now. So many things are being banned with censorship. So many things are being blocked. I posted a video about a guy I've been talking about for a while, Josh Rogan, who exposed the CCP government to me in a lot of things. I posted a video. Twitter took an hour to post it, and I had good internet. I was sending you messages and it was working fine, but it took an hour to post that tweet because it talked about COVID. It talked about a billion different things that the censors are now starting to let up. Because for a while, you couldn't talk about the Wuhan lab. You couldn't talk about these things. The censors banned them. Now you can, but they find ways to be able to make sure that you're not messing with their thought, their perspective. It goes back to the beginning of what we said. We're too afraid of another person voicing something and being ruled out as false or true because we only believe what we want to believe. We don't care about what another person believes. If they don't believe what you believe, then it's easier to cut them out of your life rather than enhance your own growth and talk it out.
And especially if you're a big company or business, admitting that you're wrong is the last thing you want to do, because guess what? That costs you money.
That costs you money.
And that's what it comes down to. Whether you are wrong, you're going to find every way you can to basically to avoid admitting that.
There was so much evidence against Nestle company and that child slavery type thing about where they were getting their chocolate, which has had been happening for a while. It's kind of like the joke about the Catholic Church. It's weird how now everyone's looking into it, where it's like there's a fucking stereotype for the longest time about the Catholic Church. It was kind of riddled with truth, in my opinion. But Nestle got off. They were innocent in court. And it was like Supreme Court was like, huh. It was like a meme. It was like, you guys are doing child slavery? Okay, innocent. And then they passed it. It's like, yeah, because they had enough money to back it up. They have enough money to throw at it to make sure that it ends here and you don't continue with the court case. A lot of these things, if it's not settled outside of court, a lot of these companies win when they're proven wrong because they have the ambition to make it go as long as possible. They have the money, they have all the funding to be able to snuff you out like a flame rather than you go into debt continuing the process.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing with the Catholic Church too. I wonder if that's an aspect of where the church has now been a lot more removed from government and the state, where they're not as influential anymore. So now they can actually be looked into, and businesses now taken over that role where big businesses are so tied up with governments that they need the money. So of course they're going to get bailed out.
It was my theory I said 3 years ago. I talked to a rabbi who told me I was wrong about it. And then I ended up sending him an article not even 2 weeks later after 13 priests were arrested in the Vatican. And he just blocked me because he knew I was right. But it was an aspect of the government's afraid of two things: the people, because when they get together, they can disband the government, and religion. Religion's too old and too powerful. But now we're seeing with the amount of religious faith that is in our societies is at an all-time low. And it keeps getting lower and lower every single year or every generation that passes because Now it's at this, like, if you would have said 1904, for instance, if you would have talked about religion, reincarnation, people would have been like 100%. That was a big factor back in the day. Now it's seen as like, what are you talking about? You're religious. Who gives a shit? Like, it doesn't matter anymore. It's not a concept of talking about it anymore. People rather choose to worship at home. They
And
started
speak,
taking down churches. Governments were taking down churches and building things upon those land. Now it's like you see all these religious centers that being attacked, all these priests and all this like stuff being riddled out, is because religion's not seen as like a gate anymore. Well, it's not seen as a wall anymore. It's seen as a gate. Now we can go through it because not a whole lot of people will back this up and fight against us. I don't want it to get to the point where people start to become that next milestone, that next little thing that they start to take down. Now you don't have this opinion anymore. Now we're going to live in a totalitarian government like the CCP is, where they can control their people and do all these types of things. It's very, very interesting because main conspiracy guy, Alex Jones, talked about this a year and a half ago, saying China owns Hollywood. John Cena put up a video apologizing to the Chinese government because he called Taiwan a country. That pissed them
yeah,
off that they called Taiwan a country. And we got to see this actor speak perfect Mandarin apologizing. Alex Jones was right about the Chinese government owns Hollywood. I'm just
and
saying, you start to look at a bunch of stuff. Did you know that Fast and Furious made $135 billion, or was it billion or $1 million in the box office? Do you know where 100 and was it 110 million of that money came from? Was China. The rest of it was here. That's
yeah,
their big
and
avenue.
I mean, I've seen in the news too where this has become seems to have become a bigger issue in America as well, where the whole relationship with China, because it's always been I can't even, as long as I can remember, it's been an issue here in Australia in politics with the influence that China has, because it's been well known that so many of our big universities are propped up through Chinese students coming into Australia. Um, there's even been some scandals in politics with potential, I don't know how founded they are. I haven't delved too deep into it, where there's been suggestions that people that have entered into Australian politics have been connected to the Chinese government in some way. We even had, in the state that I live in, our port up north, there was a deal that was almost going to go through, where they were going to give a 99-year lease to China over it. And this port houses parts of the Navy as well. Luckily, it was stopped by the federal government, but it's been going on here, like just with a lot of the issues that China's involvement in many of our areas.
They found a way to divide us. There's a bunch of people that say, I hate this woke type thing. Like the people that act woke, for instance. It's not necessarily the idea of woke. It's the idea of woke is pretty good. It's not bad. But the people that are enforcing it, the people that want to cancel you, the people that want to light you up and start riots and all these types of things because they don't like what you say and they look at their government like they're complete monsters. That's all because Confucius institutes. The ones that come over here, the Chinese government that buys up a lot of our education systems and all these things, they brainwash you to hate your own government and show you all these evils. It's being told another perspective, not from your side. It's being told a perspective from an outside force. If you saw an article about someone shooting a person in the street, and then they give you this whole entire explanation on the news, when you meet that person and he tells you the real story, you're like, I had no idea. Oh, that guy tried to kill you first and you were defending yourself, but the news showed me you shot him down in the street. You're going to have a bias against that person. Same thing with these Confucius institutes that are teaching the Chinese government, like the government's controlling and teaching all this Chinese education. It's important to have those, but they're also teaching you to hate your own country and teach you about what their perspective of our country is. And the issue is when you do that over here in America, you're having a bunch of people that have freedom, have all these things that we take for granted, and they're starting riots and fighting against their own government and trying their best to expose it and destroy it, start to raid Capitol buildings and shit. And someone brought up a point to me. Well, we have those same institutions over there too. We do. America has institutions over there that teach about American history and everything like that too. But the issue is when they learn something like that from our perspective, They don't go and fight their government because they know their government will kidnap their whole entire family, do everything, and make sure that they're never found from again. They'll be put in concentration camps and things of that sort. Over here, there's no fear of that. You're not going to get picked up by your government and thrown into a camp. That's not going to happen. So they have full capability to be able to ride and do all these things and destroy your own government. If you're an outside person looking in at a government where its people are destroying it, it's an easy time to capture it. That's all I'm fucking saying. It's not that hard to predict where it's going to go. It's not just going to hit here. It's going to hit Australia. It's going to hit the United Kingdom. Who's falling first? That's the big thing right here. Who is going to understand who's going to go down first?
I mean, and it's a strategy that's probably as old as time as well, where you look into another society and the two nations that are opposed to each other, and you look within the society and you look at the divisions and you fan those flames. It's a distraction, and then it takes away some of the energy from what can be focused on you as well.
Why
And
do I
then,
feel crazy talking about it though, Mark? If you say that like you understand what I'm saying, it's not it sounds crazy, but it's not. It's real shit that's happening. But when I say it, I feel like a fucking nut job. I feel like I smoked crack a minute ago.
well, it's again, and it comes down to who you're talking about. Like if it's someone contemporary, like what you're talking about with China, that's when people go, "Oh, conspiracy theory," or because it's it's something that looks shady and that it's in the shadows somewhere. But I think it probably helpful to actually go back and look for historical examples where the same things have happened, where we're actually removed from those events. And then it makes it much easier to look into and understand what's actually really happening without being personally invested in what's going on. I think this is a bit off topic, but it's kind of similar to another thing I read about with Iraq, trying to understand the insurgency and how to deal with what was going on. They, I know the Americans turned to studying the French in Algeria, because it was a very similar situation that was occurring, and it was happened 50 years earlier, but um, the Americans were far removed from either side that was involved. So they weren't forming biases on, oh no, we couldn't possibly be wrong because we're smart. They're actually studying a completely separate conflict, and they could then learn the mistakes and what was going wrong without having to put themselves in a position where they'd admit they were wrong themselves.
Did you see the interview with Putin?
Which one?
The one where it happened a couple days ago where he was in
No, I haven't recently. No.
he lied about a bunch of shit that we know that he's doing. And it's an aspect of there's no respect anymore. It seems as like now it's just this idea of I want what I'm going to get and I'm tired of wasting time. People think invasions are brought over here with guns. People think it's going to be this Red Dawn scenario that China goes over. I go, no, they've been slowly doing it by just making sure they can put all their chips into place by buying up every institution, buying up all these things, and watching a government destroy itself to a point where we need help getting out of it. And the best way to do that is if we have a new regime or new takeover happen. That's all I'm saying is people think that it's going to be this way. But if you look out throughout history, some of the best military advantages and the best military tactics have been takeovers like this, where it's more of a diplomatic takeover. It's more of a money and an economy takeover rather than an aspect of just fighting with swords. As much as the Spartans and how cool they are, shout out to Steve. But it also boils down to the aspect of imagine if you can take over a country without even launching a strike by just
Yeah.
slowly but surely taking over. That seems like a way more prosperous way than going over there and just kidnapping everybody.
How to win without even fighting, and that's one of the Sun Tzu maxims about the most superior way of warfare is being without.
See, I'm glad that you referenced something because then I don't feel like I'm completely on crack talking about this type of stuff because it sounds insane and somebody listening is like, what the hell is this person on? But once you start understanding a lot more of it, it starts to open up a little bit pretty clear.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of these concepts that you are talking about. They're scattered all throughout history. They've happened before, um, but I think this is the big thing: is we're so caught up with the moment, and um, everything's become so politicized that it's hard to actually try and look through all the fog at what's actually really happening. And I think I don't know. I just maybe because I love history, but I think the key is looking for other examples that have happened throughout time and study them. That way you don't bring in your own biases into what's happening because you're not involved.
Stepping down from your own perspective to be able to understand another's. That's a good one. It goes back to what we were saying in the beginning.
It does. And I think that's where a big part of it lays, is being able to remove yourself from it. Because, and I mean, we've seen it. I don't know how you get out of it, where uh, the different groups, the interests are all involved. So it makes it hard to actually try and get to what's actually true. Because, like we said before, you've got a preconceived idea. A lot of people don't want to back down from that idea. They don't want to admit they're wrong. And especially, I mean, especially if you're a government or a business, which is, that's what we're sort of talking about here, is big level players that are against each other. They're not going to admit they're wrong to each other. That either shows weakness.
Shout out to my social experiment, Robbie's Rhetoric. I like it. I like it. It's what's going to be named after. When I'm long and gone, people will look at it and be like, he was on to something. He was on to something.
I think history it's still got its uses, I think. And I think it's can be very valuable in trying to understand our current day by trying to find examples from the past.
And that's what's important about you, Mark, because shout out to your podcast. Do you want to let people know where they can find it? We've been talking for about an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah. So you can basically any podcasting platform, you can find Casting Through Ancient Greece. I've also got a website, www.castingthroughancientgreece.com, or else you can find me on Facebook at Casting Through Ancient Greece and on Twitter at casting_Greece.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description. You have any possible endings you want to end on? Anything you want to let the people know, or?
What do I?
We talked about a lot of stuff. I love it because you're like, what are we going to talk about? I was like, I have no clue.
I think if you want to look at empires and invasions, I think go and have a listen to my series about the Greek and Persian wars. I think you may be surprised that you may find some relevant material within that you can associate to our current day as well.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me again, Mark. It's been a pleasure. Sorry if I hit you with some heated stuff right out the front. It's like I hit you with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, and you were like, I thought we were practicing. I didn't know we were playing for real. But it's been a pleasure, and thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank Podcast.